All right, let's make a start. Good evening, everyone. My name is Joel Carnegie, and on behalf of the Geelong Regional Library Corporation, I'd like to welcome you to the library's author event for this evening. The Geelong Regional Library Corporation acknowledges Wadawurrung and Eastern Ma original owners for the lands on which our library services operate. And we pay our respects to Wadawurrung and Eastern Ma elders, past, present and emerging. And we acknowledge and celebrate First Nations people of this land as the custodians of learning, literacy, knowledge and story. Before we begin our discussion tonight, a little bit about myself. I'm an ABC Classic presenter, MC, documentary, story maker and performer and musician. Also the artistic director of the Space Company, which is a Geelong-based nationally touring theatre company, and creator and host of the Australian Digital Summit on Storymaking called the Storymakers Institute. And you can catch the next season of the Storymakers Institute podcast, which is coming out in August. Well, we're here tonight, and I think we're kind of lucky to be here tonight in many respects, given that, just to acknowledge the elephant in the room tonight, and I think we're all kind of feeling different things about it, in the fact that we're going into a 5-day lockdown from midnight tonight. That's going to bring up a whole bunch of stuff for all of us, so I just wanted to just kind of take a moment to acknowledge that. You know, feel free to sit with that, but we're going to have a great time tonight too, and hopefully, just park that for an hour or so as we talk about this fabulous book and this powerhouse literary duo that we have with us tonight. Just a couple of things on that though. We were going to have Sarah Cole and hear her work, her dystopian new novel for young adults, Virozone, which is set in a future when violence and environmental disaster have ravaged the world that's been split into zones to protect what little is left. Unfortunately, Sarah has decided to withdraw from tonight, and we wish her well and wish all of you well and all the best for the days that are to come. We also, of course, remind you to be physically distanced tonight and to keep your masks on, and there's some sanitizer lurking around as well if you would like to use it. So, to Graham Zinssion and Anne Buist, a literary power duo. Is that an okay description to describe you? Maybe it is. We'll get into that in a minute. Graham, of course, is the internationally best-selling author of The Rosie Project, The Rosie Effect, The Rosie Results, and The Best of Adam Sharp. And Anne is the author of the psychological thrillers Medea's Curse, Dangerous to Know, This I Would Kill For, and The Long Shadow. Together they've co-authored Two Steps Forward and their latest book, Two Steps Onward, which we're of course very excited to hear about tonight. We also have plenty of time for questions as well too, a little bit later. So mentally make some notes and we'll come to you with a sanitised microphone a little later on. But first, please join me in welcoming Graham and Anne.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Welcome to Geelong. Wise, witty and wine-filled is how your latest joint venture, Two Steps Onward, is described. It tells the story of Zoe and a Californian artist and the English engineer Martin, who have an unexpected opportunity to reunite some 3 years later after their last walking adventure, as described in Two Steps Forward, with this second chance to follow in the footsteps of pilgrims across Europe. But instead of the famous Camino de Santiago in northwest Spain, this time Martin and Zoe are following the less travelled Chemin d'Assis, I think that's how you pronounce it, and the Via Francigena along the mountainous plains and paths of rural France to Rome in this next book. So both of you have walked these extraordinarily lengthy trails in real life. It was pre-COVID, of course. Did you come back wise, witty, and wine-filled? Graham.
Oh, okay. Well, certainly the third. Number of alcohol-free days across 3 walks. I mean, we did the walk from central France to Santiago twice by slightly different routes. And then we did the walk from central France to Rome. So in all about 5,500 kilometres, and the number of alcohol-free days on those journeys was exactly 0.
However, I tried to make Zoe drink less in this one. I tried hard.
Yeah, well, great, isn't it? We tried. Anne said, we really can't make these 2 drink so much because all of our books are full of booze. So I'm going to cut right back. There won't be so much wine in this book, and we really both tried very, very hard. And it comes back, the reviewers say wine-filled. So there you go.
And did you come back wise and witty?
And you can do the wise.
No, he's the comedic writer, so perhaps not so witty, though. Like even in my thrillers, you've got to have light relief. So there's, and in the 3 that are a series, she has bipolar disorder, so there's always a moment when her mania kind of, heads her into kind of interesting paths, and you've got to lighten that tension. But the wise definitely, and I think mainly the pilgrimage, the first pilgrimage, wise in the sense that it gives you the time to reflect, not necessarily that anyone else would think you were any wiser, but they are just an amazing opportunity to reflect and put in perspective your life.
And let me answer the witty one.
Oh, yes, please. Did you get funnier?
Well, we weren't funny at all before we started.
Oh,
because
right.
We were
So this is a new skill.
Because we were unpublished. So it was only after that first walk in 2011 that either of us published fiction.
Oh, is that right?
So that was a huge turning point for both of us. We both had day jobs, and relatively shortly afterwards, both of us began publishing fiction. Anne had a bunch of books which we're not supposed to talk about, which was sort of her apprenticeship. She wrote erotic fiction for women. And let me tell you, as a bloke, to pick up, this is hardcore stuff. I mean,
I
in the
do
proper
not
sense of the word,
recommend them.
to pick it up and say, my wife wrote that. That was in her head is a fairly extraordinary sort of experience.
I guess they're available in Awkward bookstores.
No.
Well, exactly the opposite, actually. but sort of Anne wrote...
In a box under the cupboard, into the,
Anne wrote all of that. I think she'd have both agreed the right word is progressed to the crime genre after
Natural kind of progression, really.
And I had been working on screenplays. I'd been studying screenwriting and rewrote The Rosie Project, which was a screenplay as a novel which went under contract in 2012. So from 2011 walking the Camino to 2012, certainly for me having a contract, I had an opportunity, I guess, to be witty that hadn't been happening before the Camino.
Well, you're only known to be witty once you're published, really. Otherwise, you're just doing dad jokes in your bedroom or something. I wanted to do a snap poll, actually. I was wondering if anyone in the room has actually walked the routes that we've been talking about and will talk about tonight in terms of those long walking journeys. Yes? Same route? Not the same route, different routes. Well, there's lots of different, some over here as well. Yeah. What is it like? I want to ask all of you this question because it's something that for me feels like it's an exercise that you go through at a certain point in your life to go on this kind of pilgrimage, this sort of walking adventure. Is it something that you have to experience to really understand?
I personally think so. And the first one was different to the others. And I didn't even know why I was going on it. But I think everyone who does a pilgrimage first time is doing it for a reason, even if they don't know when they start it. And that was where I had the literary epiphany. And I was actually grieving. And I didn't realise that at the time. It was kind of one of those professional things that I was coping and I was doing okay, and I wasn't. I was helping everyone else, and it wasn't until I walked that I really realised I needed to deal with my own sort of stuff, which was kind of was able to put into Zoe's grief. Zoe in the first book is a recent widow, and I've never been widowed, but you tap into your experiences, and grief has some commonality even if I haven't actually lost a husband.
Yeah, and I think in storytelling, it's classic storytelling that someone undergoes a change that perhaps the reader recognises they need to undergo, but that they don't. So, given that Camino is sort of famous for encouraging those sorts of changes, it's a wonderful place to tell a story, as well as what it gives you in terms of scenery and people and so on. But in this second novel, we have 6 walkers. And we saw that as an opportunity to explore the different reasons that people might take a pilgrimage, not the least being for the very traditional reason, which is religious. It's a pilgrimage. So we have one person who's a devout Catholic who's walking it in the hope of a cure for a serious illness or forgiveness for the sins before the serious illness wins. And we've got Gilbert, the wine merchant, who's taking a vacation. He's having a holiday. He's trying the wine. He's being a tourist.
And there's lots of great food and wine in France and Italy.
And there are others who do it for the personal challenge or the physical challenge and so on. So we tried to, when we had that number of walkers in this book, we tried to explore some of those different reasons and give the armchair traveller a little bit of a sense of someone to relate to, I guess.
For those uninitiated, tell us about the significance and some of the history of these 2 routes. What did you pick up when you were walking in them and based on the research that you've done about the significance of these 2 significantly long walks?
Okay, there are actually 3 or 4 walks involved. So, and the Camino people here who may well know more than we do on these things, but essentially Santiago de Compostela on the west coast of Spain, or very close to the west coast of Spain, became a pilgrimage site around the 9th or 10th century when a human skull purported to be that of St. James the Elder was discovered and duly anointed as being that, and is now in a silver coffin in Santiago in the cathedral. So that became a pilgrimage site, and people would walk from all over Europe to that place. And the well-known route from Saint Jean Pied de Port on the French-Spanish border through to Santiago de Compostela became known as the French Way, the Camino Frances. But not everybody walked that route, because obviously if you're coming from Portugal, that's not going to be useful to you. And you didn't all go on a plane as people do today to Saint Jean Pied de Port and start in the same place. You walked out your door wherever you were, and you followed feeder routes, which eventually joined up with different, thicker routes, and that was just one of the big thick routes. So the first time we walked, we took a feeder route first from Cluny, so a real tiny tributary from Cluny in central France to Le Puy-en-Velay, and then we took the much more well-known Le Puy route through to Saint-Jean-Pied de Port, and then we took the coastal alternative, or one of the coastal alternatives, called the Camino del Norte, and then joined the Camino Primitivo, one of the oldest of the walking routes through there.
Yeah. There's lots of walks.
So
You
there's
follow a scallop shell.
So just giving you a sense that there's so many options there. And then for this one, again, there are 2 routes involved. They eventually join the
Via Francigena.
Via Francigena, which is a very ancient route to Rome, which is an obvious pilgrimage site.
Starting from Canterbury. So, but they don't start from Canterbury, they hit it.
But they start with the Chemin d'Assis, which is a modern route. It's got no genuine history from Cluny, or actually from Vézelay in France, through to Assisi. But it's really commemorating St. Francis of Assisi, and just who was very much associated with nature and so forth. So it's a modern route on existing roads and so forth, playing into the idea that we have so many people who want to do these long distance walks. That was a longish answer, but I hope we haven't managed to get it too far wrong.
We've got some nodding heads. I think you.
I'm sorry. When you're doing these walks, you are very aware that they are religious walks. There are crucifixes, there are crosses everywhere, or oratoires, in France and in particularly in Italy. So oratories, lots of religious significance. You're very conscious of it.
Yeah. Did you find that the people that you met along the way on the walks that you took were doing those walks at a certain time in their life, or did you find that there was a whole range of ages and stages?
There's a couple of different kind of points to make there. Mainly, we saw people on the traditional Camino de Santiago starting in Saint Jean, and we see lots and lots of people of great infrastructure. If you're going to do one walk and you're doing it alone, that's the one you want to do because you meet other people. And almost universally, they were doing it for a reason. Grief was high on the list, often recently widowed, separated, and very much in the sort of as Martin Sheen's movie, the way he walked the ashes of his son, that type of experience, people dealing with serious illness. The rest, virtually entirely, we saw very few pilgrims. We see the Europeans take 2 weeks off every year, and they just start somewhere, finish somewhere, and the next year they start again. So you see them throughout Europe, but we saw really very few people on the other walks. Hence why we needed 6 people in Two Steps Onward, because we needed some conflict and something happening to keep the reader's interest, and we really feel we had to make that from the people who started together.
Let's talk about the most recent walking route, which appears in Two Steps Onwards, which is the walk across France and to Italy down to Rome. What did you encounter out in the wilderness that made it into the book?
The Alps. Oh my God, they were here. There was no singing the sound of music, I've got to tell you.
No Julie Andrews?
Not
no hills are alive?
another mountain.
Oh, that's disappointing.
I mean, beautiful countryside and lots of food and wine along the way. But in Liguria, a beautiful place, and most people, if they've been to Liguria, will have been to Genoa or maybe Cinque Terre, which we've also been to separately. Gorgeous, gorgeous places. But that's where the tourists go. They don't go into these mountains. There are these old hotels that are falling apart that the Genoans used to go and have their holidays in the 50s, I think. And they're kind of got a skeleton staff. This was pre-COVID. So, you know...
You can imagine what they're like now.
Yeah,
just the skeletons.
Heartbreaking, beautiful countryside, lovely people, but this sense of derelict, and we needed a low point in the book, and there was no doubt that that's where it was going to be. Didn't quite fit geographically, but we kind of made it that was sort of fitted.
Yeah, I would add though that was probably in Liguria. That was probably more Anne's reaction than mine, and I quite enjoyed it. And therefore that gave us a nice sort of conflict with Zoe's take and versus Martin's, because as you know we write alternating chapters, and part of you want to have a literary purpose for doing that, and one of those is to show different perspectives on the same terrain. When you ask what made itself into the book, we actually this time wrote the story of all the conflicts and what would go on before we did the walk. We had done some research, so we knew broadly what we were going to be doing. But then we did the walk and let that flow into the book, and it caused a lot of changes. So we had a skeleton there, but we didn't feel tied to it. But we did know what we were looking for and so forth, and it really... We saw so much. I mean, it's not a travelogue, but necessarily you're going to talk about the places that you go through. So, and it's not an instruction book for how to do a walk, although I would say read Two Steps Forward if you're contemplating doing a walk like this, and you'll learn most of what you need to know about the practicalities beside the actual route and where the hostels are and that sort of thing, for which you get a guidebook.
So no Italian bears or anything that you had to encounter along the way?
One of the things that really struck me, and it may have been just because it was the late autumn, winter, was the lack of animals. And in fact, we looked up, did a bit of research about the area, and there was some arguments that a lot of the chemicals they'd been using for farming had got into the water, and that a lot of the wildlife had been taken out, and I just found that fairly devastating, I have to say. But then you sort of go down, once we hit the Via Francigena, you're into Tuscany, and again, very much farming land, but these amazing old towns that have been there for centuries, and that was just sort of history of that was just fantastic.
Yeah, one of the things that Martin comments on, though, is that Martin has already visited Tuscany, as plenty of English people do, and had the family holiday there, and what a pain it was being on the autostrada between the villages and so forth, and you'd fight all the traffic and the toll booths and all that sort of thing all day so you could get to the tourist town. Whereas now, the journey between the towns is actually more a part of what it's all about than the actual arrival at the towns. A real shift in where the focus is.
And the paths are not on main roads. You really escape all of that. It's just in the countryside. Really beautiful.
You walk all day in the Ligurian Mountains, the Apennines, without seeing anybody.
Did you get lost regularly?
Don't think.
Or is lost just a sort of relative term?
Look, I think you have the combination of the markings. And, the idea with these pilgrimages is that you can find, a scallop shell sign for the Camino, or in this case, the sign of the dove for the Chemin d'Assis,
I
and
have
so on.
a dove and a scallop shell around my neck separately.
And you just, in theory, you just start following those on lampposts and trees and so forth, and you find yourself at your destination. Now, in real life, it varies. Sometimes it's so precise that, even going through little villages and taking out every little alley and so forth. And others, you say, when did you last see one? I don't know. But we do carry GPSs.
I was going to say
these days,
Google Maps or something.
Yeah, look, we use what's your app that you use all the time?
Oh, Maps.me. I think
Maps.me seems to be, but there are lots and lots of apps around, and we never felt unsafe. We never felt, really lost. Just where the hell are we at the moment? Go on, go back up the hill. I saw us there.
Were you actively taking notes along the way and going, yes, I'm going to file that away for later on when you're coming to kind of effectively restructure and then write, what would ultimately be the final book? Or were all of the recollections that, or was it just largely the recollections of your trip after you got back that made it back into the final novel? Anne?
The first time, not at all, because we didn't know we were going to write about it. But we had a load of video, so that really helped. Like hours of video, just done on an iPhone. Oh, well, actually, no, we actually had one of those. It was pre-iPhone videos in 2011. It was this other little thing that now you get in your iPhone. But the second time we did the Camino, we knew, well, we'd already drafted it, so it was to flesh and to sort of enrich it. And of course, this time we knew we were going to write a book, so I was really soaking it in. And because on the first walk, I'd really developed this ability to sort of be in my head and in the moment and with nature, that's something I haven't lost. And it's just, you just slip back straight into it, and suddenly you're just so aware of your surroundings and just noticing it and enjoying it and soaking it up.
And creating story is very much about seeing something and asking what if. So you meet someone, you stay somewhere, you see something in the scenery and you say, well, what if it was raining? Or what if that person had been, this or that, because that was a possibility? Or what if this place had been full? And you start playing with story around that.
And when we arrived in Scafera, we were drenched. We have very good equipment, but we were soaked, absolutely soaked. And it was freezing cold. And we stuffed our... just like in the book, she said, please turn the lights out. And it was freezing cold. There was no heating, and she was clearly...
struggling.
Financially struggling. And we had to get our boots. There was nowhere to dry our boots. And we both have very lightweight boots. So we found these pile of newspapers and stuffed our shoes with newspapers, which we've sort of done in the past. But then we made up the fiction part of it, which you get to read in the book about what the newspapers were. That wasn't real, but, well, we don't know. She spoke Italian and we don't.
Well, that's right. You wouldn't know, would you? No. I love it. So I guess in many respects, then it's you. Despite this feeling like it's the second book. It's three different experiences and two different ways of writing a story that has a sort of similar through line in terms of a journey that these two characters are going on and encountering all the things that they do along the way.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of the two different perspectives. Well, actually, there's a couple of things here. We stayed with friends a few days ago, and they were talking about their travels and how that they sort of lived them three times. Once when they were planning them, once when they were actually doing them, and then once when he would make the photo book, the modern equivalent of the photo album. And, well, of course, we make a real book. We make a written book afterwards, but it's fiction. So, we have moments where we'll say, remember that, and I'll say, remember that guy that we met? I say, no, we didn't. We made that up. That's in the book. and you do start to get this reality.
So what was true and what was what was fake.
And the other thing is the two perspectives. So when we, very briefly, when we wrote Two Steps Forward, the problem was we'd always written together and we planned this book together, except the part that we don't do together is, we plan a book, and then we write our own individual books, and then we edit each other's books. But here we got to the right time, and it was like, who's going to get their name on the cover? So we decided we'd write two separate books. We'd write the Zoe book and the Martin book. Anne would write the Zoe book, I'd write the Martin book. We'd publish both books, and a couple could buy both books and swap them over, all that sort of stuff, and it was a really stupid idea. We did it, and our publisher said, this is an incredibly stupid idea. We already knew that because the people we'd sent the books to try it out, it said, look, we read a couple of chapters each and then we swap them and this sort of thing. And then we discovered we'd been told the same thing twice, and that's really annoying. So we just did the biggest cut and paste in history and turned it into one book. But the second time, well, we knew how that was done, and we weren't going to go down that path.
At least this time, we just wrote our own chapters and then edited. And you go back and make sure the endings and the start of the next one kind of go through. But the really good thing with this one was we knew the characters, because all 6 characters are in the first book. And our characters have different opinions about the people in this book, and Bernard in particular, the young German man who Martin really dislikes. Well, Zoe's forgiven him, and Zoe thinks he's a good young man and he's going places, and she's not so keen on Martin's daughter. And of course, Martin's rather fond of his daughter. So you get to have these really different takes, but they're the same person. So we have to agree on those characters, and then our character has to have the different take on them.
How do you jointly write a book without driving each other mad?
Yeah, you're making an assumption there.
Or you just do. I mean, that's...
Look, as I say, we've always planned together, so that helps a lot. So it's just the drafting. We've got a plan. Anne writes her chapters. I write Martin's chapters. Anne writes Zoe's chapters, and then we swap them back and forth. Oddly, it's very unusual for a fiction book, to be actually written in terms of text coming from 2 different people. When you see 2 names, and that's rare enough anyway on a book, it's probably because one of them has added their name to get sales or whatever, or has come up with a grand plan, and someone else has actually done the dirty work of writing the book. If it's James Patterson on the cover, then he probably either told someone what to write, essentially, or he did the writing and Bill Clinton put his name on it. So it's, it's not...
That's what I do.
Yeah.
Why not?
But we actually write a lot of the text together, as do Nikki French, I believe, but there's not too many other examples around. And you've got 2 points of view. People are used to reading books written by one person, so even though there might be 2 points of view, the author can't disguise their voice that much, and it's still, there's that commonality, whereas we have the problem that people would read early drafts of Two Steps Forward and say, oh, that's Anne writing, or that's Graham writing. And we wanted to smooth that over so that people would never be thinking about Anne or me while they were reading the book, only about the characters. And that meant making them more similar than their voices probably would be in real life.
As partners in life as well as in creativity, do you plan stories over the dishes, or do you find yourself needing to take a more disciplined approach to the creative process?
Less disciplined. Go on.
Involves a glass and the cork comes out, and that first sort of glass of wine, it should be the only glass, it's great creative time. After that, it actually isn't very creative, but one glass of wine.
Well, it feels creative, it just doesn't stand up next morning.
But the first glass is definitely creative, so that's sort of a nightly ritual if we're in that part of our writing sort
And,
of
and,
phase or
and,
plan.
speak, and speaking as a bit of a creativity nut, because this is something that I actually did a lot of study and so on in, we are very conscious that this time over this first glass of wine is really valuable creative time, and we use it for that. We use it to plan. We say, this is the time we're getting together. This is our special time for solving problems in the book or planning new stuff. It's not just for slacking around and saying, this is a nice drop of wine, I just need to relax. No, we're going to put some time in and get this bit right.
Because I'd also imagine too that, you know, if you're writing these two characters, there is potential that one person comes up with a really brilliant idea to take the character off in this direction when the other person is like, oh wait, I thought we were kind of going over here in terms of the relationships between these characters. Of course, we have Martin and Zoe who have history, as we, you know, all the other characters do as well too within the book. So how do you juggle that when you've got one great idea? Do you have to convince the other that on the merits of this new idea you've got?
I mean, that happens for me when I'm writing the Natalie King or The Long Shadow, which is the standalone one, because I'm the only person writing. And I planned it broadly, but I might end up going in a completely different direction. But he's a planner, and we had to plan this, so we knew what was going on in the chapters. Now, that said, there was a little bit of movement, and we discussed that and come to and then he'd shift his chapter or I'd shift mine. We'd move it around a bit, and there was a little bit of movement.
We do the big stuff before it goes into text. We've worked out what's going to be written. You know, someone say, in this chapter, I'd rather Zoe did this, and we kick it around and see where it might go. But interestingly, people ask, do characters ever sort of take on a bit of a life of their own? And there's in each of the two books, Anne wrote all the Zoe chapters, but in each book I rewrote one Zoe chapter. So not a huge percentage of what's on the page. In fact, there's more Zoe on the page, more Anne on the page than there is me. But in each book I wrote what I thought was a really critical Zoe chapter, because it was like, this is where Zoe has to come to terms with herself, and Zoe can't see herself as clearly as an outsider can. Well, of course, Anne's an outsider, but she so inhabits Zoe that she can't see the wood for the trees on certain aspects of Zoe, and I'm sort of standing there thinking, oh, Zoe's not realising.
It's the same chapter in both books, that chapter where Zoe finally sees the light and realises what she got wrong. And yeah, even though I knew the story, I still got caught into it.
Wow. And do you do the same for Graham as well? In that same...
He's much more analytical. And of course his character's much more analytical.
And my character is ultimately not the main character. If you were making a movie, these are balanced books and there's two characters, but when you make a movie, you almost invariably, except for a romantic comedy, you specify one, or certain buddy movies, you specify one character as the more important. You'd see it, think of Gone Girl, for example. I said, this, I can tell you that when they make the movie, it won't be Nick and Amy equal. There'll be a main character, be Nick. And if I remember, I've never seen the movie, but so I would say Zoe is, if you make a movie of this, and it's been optioned to Disney, and Ellen DeGeneres down to produce, and it seems to be fading at the moment, but there's still interest around. They will make Zoe the main character.
But I think the reason she needs to be in this book is because they go on this walk because of her girlfriend Camille. So it's about a lot of things, this book, and reinvention, but it's also a lot about long-term friendships, and particularly long-term female friendships. And I've got 3 girlfriends who we meet regularly and meant to meet on Monday night, and just got the text, it's off, girls, let's try for another night.
I think everyone's doing that at the moment.
And I've known 2 of them longer than I've known Graham. And for Zoe and Martin, their relationship is really new, even though they're, late 40s, early 50s. And she's known Camille 25 or more years. So we make her choose in this book which one's more important. So it's... you'll have to read it.
Well, that's right. You have to read it to find out.
Yeah.
In a way, is Zoe and Martin, are they autobiographical at all? A little bit.
I would think they're probably our least autobiographical characters. Look, I don't think we've got any autobiographical characters in our writing. I think I can speak for Anne as well. I mean, the nearest person to an autobiographical character in my writing would be Hudson Tillman, Don's son. But that's autobiographical of me at 12, not as I am currently. But every character has something of yourself in them. And when I say every character, not just the main characters, but probably Gilbert the wine buff has got more of me in him than Martin has.
Yeah.
You know? So I would say not particularly so, but you can't avoid putting something of yourself into the characters.
Yeah. I guess there's some notion that finding a way for yourself into these characters is potentially one way of kind of developing a character, is by starting with something that you do know and then moving out from there. I guess, given that you have had the experience of doing these walks and that has informed the writing in different ways so much, there's in a way, you can separate them, but you're also quite interlinked as well as individuals. Would that be an accurate assessment?
Psychiatrists can answer that one.
Yeah.
I had a loss.
Have some therapy here.
Look, you really do live your character. I mean, for me, Zoe was inspired by two friends, one of whom was our first reader of Two Steps Forward and promptly went and did the Camino.
Before the book was published.
And she's partly in it, and the other one happens to be American. There's definitely a bit of her in there, and I don't follow star signs, I have to tell you. There were certain things I've adopted from her that are definitely not me. But there's other aspects of her that invariably some of her attitudes and things come out, particularly over the issue she conflicts with Camille. And we didn't set out to do that, but we thought it was a nice kind of way the book went, the characters' letters, or we'd written it. We set it in the first book as their backstory, and then it fed into this story.
So this is something that happens, that we didn't plan a sequel, just as I didn't plan a sequel to the Rosie Project and didn't plan a sequel to Medea's Curse. And when you've written a book and then decide to do a sequel, you were left, you've made a bed and you've got to lie in it. You've got to work with the material you've got. So we said, who are the people who are going to go on this walk? Well, it's going to be Martin and Zoe, of course, but who else do we have as characters left over from the first book that readers might know? Well, there's Zoe's friend Camille, and there's Martin's daughter Sarah, and there's, of course, Bernard, who was on the walk with them. And what about Camille's husband? Oh, he left her. Oh, he can come back.
It's that simple.
And you actually start raising interesting questions. I mean, Camille is seriously ill. The husband has come back to look after, and he was, in fact, that situation was inspired by a real life situation where, so Camille's got an uncommon form of multiple sclerosis which affects your cognitive functions before it affects your motor functions. And we know a woman who suffers from that, and so she did a lot to inspire, not so much the Camille character, but some of the symptoms and the issues that she faced. But her husband returned to her after they'd split up to look after her. And he is, in fact, the person who primarily inspired Don Tillman and the Rosie Project.
There's some cross-series pollination going on there.
The Rosie Project was almost a story, based on their lives, and it became very, very different afterwards. But connections.
There's this circumstance of how Camille and she became friends. They're very different people, which set up some great conflict. But also, they had to resolve it. And it's one of the things I like about Two Steps Onward, because we have so much polarised world at the moment. I mean, America really typified it sort of through the Trump kind of, but I think it's true in Australia as well. And they had to resolve it, and they weren't going to change each other's mind, because it was a particular topic no one changes their mind on, but they had to respect the other person's opinion, and that's, I thought, was really important. And I was pleased in the end, even though I wouldn't have chosen in many ways to do it if I'd kind of started right at the beginning thinking it was going to be a sequel.
Or if I could just buy in on that too, that when you write a book, most authors will tell you that, most decent authors will tell you, that if you start off on a mission to educate people or to change their minds and so on in fiction, they're going to feel beaten over the head. They're not going to enjoy it. That what really happens is you choose an area, a space that means something to you. You write it as honestly as you possibly can, and the themes, and including your views on that, will emerge in that. So you often don't know the themes of a book until you've actually finished writing it. And then you say, oh, yeah, okay, we should probably dot the I's and cross the T's on those themes. So Anne's mentioned one, which is reconciliation of different views and so forth. A second is love. As is in the first book, but at different ages and how that contrasts. So you've got Gilbert who's come back to his wife to look after her, but does she want him? And why look a gift horse in the mouth? You're a sick person, someone wants to look after you, why say no to that? Well, because she doesn't love him. So, and we've got the young people in the book as well. And the third theme, which is in both books, is one of reinvention. Both of these books are very clearly about reinventing yourself at any age, but particularly in Martin and Zoe's age groups, thinking about what you might do with your life. Is it ever too late? And all sorts of aspects of your life. And this is where I'm going to do my little very quick advertisement. I'd say these are a good gift. Please read the Rosie, not the Rosie, the Two Steps Forward first. I mean, you can read Two Steps Onward standalone, but why would you? You really want to read for Two Steps Forward first. I think they're a very appropriate gift for someone in your life who is perhaps a little lost, seeking to find new directions, just reevaluating as so many people are today. And I do the advertisement because Felix is at the back of the room, our local your local bookseller, and boy, these guys, these bricks and mortar booksellers are doing it so hard. Everybody's been locked down, everybody's reading more, but it's so easy to go and order something online.
You need lots to read.
Yeah.
So easy to go and do it online, and the bricks and mortar booksellers haven't been able to open to do all of that sort of stuff. So if you want to sort of do the right thing tonight and look after Felix, then think about the person who might need some reinvention in their life, and these aren't bad choices.
Did you want anything else into that?
Can I do my
Oh, please.
The Long Shadow. It's a standalone book and it came out in COVID last year, so no events, nothing. It was heartbreaking. It just was,
Absolutely.
and it's set in rural New South Wales. And I thought, this, America will love this book. It's kind of like Big Little Lies meets The Dry, but of course America wasn't buying anything last year.
No.
Tough times.
So you can also buy that too. I wanted to mention this idea of reinvention because I think if there's ever been a time for reinvention, it's all of us on a half-hour basis as we kind of move through our day and decide who we are and what we're doing, and then we change it the next day. And depending on how open as a country we are at that sort of point in time. And I'm not entirely sure of the timelines between publishing and COVID, but was this sort of time that we exist in right now part of your kind of post-production period? And did that influence at all the writing of this new book?
I think every writer who's been writing books during the COVID period has had this difficult question of whether you include it in the story. And we finished arriving in Rome. We flew out of Rome on the 4th of March 2020. So we had that Lombardy outbreak, which was the big world COVID outbreak, was right on our tail. And everybody in Rome was totally chilled about it until we got in the plane, stopped in Dubai, and everybody's in hazard suits. Whoa, okay, there's really something going on. There's really something going on here. We chose not to put COVID in the book. So the real impact for us was that we were writing, editing during lockdown. And in the same way that some people have a good war, we had a good lockdown in that we were able to get a lot of writing done. As our publisher said, the editors don't even know they're in lockdown. They just work in the same way they always did.
Yeah.
And I had an early draft of the fourth Natalie King book, which had just sort of been sitting there, and I got to finish it, and I just hit the send button to my publisher this week.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, so that was good
Woo.
too. Yeah.
That's very exciting. I've read a couple of fiction books that have included COVID, and apart from that being a triggering exercise where you're trying to escape from the real world, I also found it really unsatisfying because of the way in which, the book I was reading was kind of describing it, because of the fast nature changing sort of world that we're in this context. It was kind of like irrelevant and go away, I don't want to deal with it anyway. So maybe you made the right call by not including it.
I'm pleased we did, but and I've read one which was totally about something like COVID, and I really didn't want to read it.
It's like,
But
yeah,
Michael
just read the news
Rodbotham's-
instead.
I'll do a plug for Michael Rodbotham. He doesn't need me to do a plug. He's world's best-selling author, but his latest one mentions it in a way that's fine. It's in passing, it exists, but at this point in time, they're not in lockdown or anything, and it's just kind of it is part of life. And
Yeah.
I figured that was actually, if you ever do it, that's how I'd do it.
How you do it. We've got some time for your questions tonight, and we've got a few minutes. So we'd love to hear from you if you've got some questions for Graham or Anne, and on anything that we've been talking about tonight or something new. There is a microphone which is lurking around. Yeah, it's in the back there. It will be sanitised between uses, so feel free to make good use of it. We'll start here.
Thanks for that. I really enjoyed the talk. The last walk you did, this is like nitty-gritty stuff. What was the daily distances and the infrastructure like?
It's definitely not the Camino like the traditional one across the top, but it was very easy to find accommodation as long as you're.
Speak for yourself.
Oh, sorry. He found some really good accommodation, as long as you were prepared to pay a bit. We didn't do. There were once you got to the Via Francigena, there were hostels that you could do. We were prepared to do little hotels, and that made it easier. And distances, we were averaging about 25 k's. That was the usual.
The other thing that was really easy was washing the clothes at the end of the day. That was a snack. Yeah, that's right. And I had to book the accommodation.
Right.
So the deal was that Anne would always wash the clothes and I'd do the accommodation. And sometimes she got the better deal and sometimes I got the better deal. Sometimes it was one quick phone call and you were done, even in my bad Italian, or they spoke English or whatever. And there were other times when I had to replot over and over again, largely through the Apennines, through the mountains, that there were just places that weren't open anymore, or you couldn't get through to, and so on. And you had to keep replotting to get there. We got it. We managed to do it.
And the Via Francigena's got quite a lot. Sandy Brown, I think, might have even written one. He's certainly done the Florence to Rome bit on the Assisi, but I think I've just seen on millions of websites, maybe not Sandy Brown, but someone I think has done a Via Francigena one that plots it all out.
Through France, there was often only one option. Yeah,
The thing to be careful with.
And they weren't hostels a lot of the time. There were a few, but you were talking about bed and breakfasts, chambre d'hôtes and that sort of thing.
The biggest challenge is it's actually quite a few days to get through the Alps, and if you're doing the Via Francigena, you come through St Bernard Pass, so you're limited when you can do it.
We stayed in a ski village. We were out of season. I think we're the only people staying in ski villages. Not village, but those big high-rise sort of buildings and that sort of thing. And because they were privately owned, some of these little chalets and so forth, we lobbed in one of those. You go up in the lifts, and all the rooms are empty, and it's just nobody there. And everything was closed.
Pizza shop open every day until you arrived. It wasn't.
Closed. What did you do on the food front on that point when you're walking 25 k's a day?
Well, that particular ski village, we'd seen it, we'd looked at it online. It was a big day because it was this. Stagger down to the pizza shop, closed. Ask someone in the street in our bad Italian, where can you eat? 2 k's back up the hill we had to walk. It was agony.
But we cook a fair bit. You cook a fair bit for yourself and so on. But we are not carrying stoves. We're not carrying tents. We are relying on there being a bed, shelter, and food.
And the kindness of strangers.
We pretty much, we never had to throw ourselves on the kindness of strangers beyond asking for directions or anything like that. Yeah.
Did you find that with the first walk and the Camino de Santiago as well?
Well, when you're on the Camino Frances, that main route, the infrastructure is impeccable. I mean, you've got villages that survive, I'm sure, based on the pilgrims coming through. So you've got a cafe that's open at 6 a.m. because that's when pilgrims want to start.
Freshly squeezed orange
Freshly
juice.
squeezed orange juice. It's all full of backpackers, and it's just like being at, my experience back at uni when you go skiing or something, or bushwalking at the beginning of the day, that everybody be piled up there getting their coffees and their steaming thermoses filled. That whole camaraderie feeling.
That's not the feeling on this latest walk.
That's only on the Camino Frances.
Some more questions? One there first. Oh, just grab a mic.
Can you tell us a bit about your day of writing, your environment? Do you, is there set days? Do you make sure you're out of your jammies?
I think I speak for both. I've actually got a book in progress, which is coming out early next year, called The Novel Project, which is about how to write a book. And one of the things that both of us used to work in, and Anne still does, in professional jobs where nobody says to you, do you have a special place, or do you have routines and rituals that you go through every day before you get your database designed? And no, you get the damn database designed by Friday, or you're in trouble. So we often find some of these things a bit, people talk about writing a little bit precious. But that said, we don't write every day because there are 3 stages in a book for us. There's planning, drafting, editing. And you can plan as you walk, as you talk, as you're driving the car, between, while you're having lunch, whatever. You can do almost the same with editing, because you can grab just, an hour or 2 and just work at the airport. But for both of us, I think we like, when we're doing that draft, to have space, a nice place. That really does make a difference. Yeah.
Yeah, and editing can be completely rewriting. So after my first readers, I had to do a complete cut and paste and chop things out, and so it's not just making
Do
sure.
not interrupt.
Yeah,
Woman
but
writing.
we've got a place up, a tiny little cottage. And we can sit in the same room by the fire.
We have to sit in the same room.
Well, that's true.
Because
We
that's
have
where
to
the
sit in
fire is.
There is no other room. Well, in bed, and I can't write in bed. But I can write in my office in town as well. Graham's not so keen with that. He prefers to go to the bar. He likes to look up at what's coming at 5 o'clock.
Fair enough, fair enough. Question down here? We'll just wait for a mic.
Post these walks, do you have any interaction with fellow walkers at all? Or what happens when you meet somebody that's done these walks? Is it a pretty animated conversation?
Yeah, I mean, it's the nature of these walks that you don't know if you'll ever see people again, and yet you might see them every day for the next month. Every encounter could be the last, or it could be the beginning of a long thing. And you tend not to push that. You tend not to say we'll meet tomorrow or anything like that, unless you're attracted to them, and of course there's all those sorts of relationships go on as well. But
Meet
some
you
of
for drinks at 5.
Some of those happen in that random way too. I mean, there are romances in that form on the Caminos, as you would expect. But because you're all travelling, most people are travelling at roughly the same pace. You get very fast and very slow, but the vast majority of people are travelling at roughly the same pace and do keep tripping over each other.
And we've kept in contact with some of them as well. There's an American couple that we're meant to be catching up with. Obviously, we're not at the moment, but yeah. And there's a couple,
sort of couple.
a British woman and a British librarian, and an Irish woman we've seen when we've been over there. Yeah, and on Facebook. Thank goodness for Facebook.
And the couple we met after we drafted the book and we were walking the second time, we got Zoe and Martin all set up. She's an Australian woman, and she met this Englishman called Martin on the thing. And we watched the sort of the romance blossom, and thought, oh my God, they're going to think that we put them in the book on purpose.
But I guess there's a sense of serendipity about some of this too, and the surprises that you kind of encounter and re-encounter as you go along. I can imagine that's a really satisfying part of it when you come across people who you thought you might not see again, but here you are, there again.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's really interesting to us because the demographic that we met, the sort of people you meet walking are so different. We've just done a four-wheel drive trip around mainly Central and Western Australia. We've had 3 months on the road.
Amazing.
And the people you meet four-wheel driving are so different from the people you meet walking. Very, very different. And let's just, without being snobby about it, let's just say the people we meet walking are probably more the sort of people we would socialise with than the people we met four-wheel driving. It's just that sort of group of professionals and so on. And the thing that would happen all the time, because you got quite a few Dutch and German walkers, and the Rosie Project was really, really big in Netherlands and in Germany. Everybody, and you'd have that conversation and say, "What do you do? I'm a writer. Do you think I might have you written anything I might have heard of?" And I'd be at the table and somebody would go, "Whoa, oh my God!" and I'd think, "Oh God!"
Out comes the phone.
I know exactly what bit of conversation they're having now. But it was it was lovely because it was a point of common interest and commonality.
There was a question somewhere over here earlier. Yep, at the back. I'll grab a mic. Coming to you in a minute.
I'm expecting a setup question from Belinda at some stage.
Oh, where's Belinda? Oh, there you are. Okay.
Fellow author.
Okay. Of all the possible routes in Europe, what made you choose this particular one for this book?
That's exactly the same as Zoe and Martin in many ways. We saw a scallop shell on when we were sitting in a cafe in Cluny and on a little stylised thing on a lamppost and asked someone, "What's that?" And researched it. And we go often back to Cluny. We spent 6 months living there, and the kids went to school there, and we know people there. And there's a dove on the post as well. So having done this one, we thought, well, we better follow the dove in the opposite direction. We actually did walk all the way to Assisi, but we found the walk hit the Via Francigena, and our characters would not have gone all the way to Assisi because she's sick and she wanted to get to Rome to see the Pope.
Well,
so it would have added an extra 2 weeks, I think, if you'd done it via Assisi. So
and that many pages as well, too. Yeah.
yeah. So we've done both, bits. Yeah.
We've got time for maybe 2 more questions. Belinda?
The setup question.
Yes.
Well, Belinda did say she was going to ask it. We didn't say, "Belinda, you've got to ask this question."
I definitely do. I'll bring us back to the Rosie Project. Henry Cavill this morning was announced as Don.
Yeah, you know what? I've got to tell you, when the Rosie Project came out, and we're talking about 2013, I used to put $50 on the bookseller's table and say, if nobody asks, who do you want to play Don in the movie, you can keep the $50. And I never, ever lost the $50.
And that's not just because he told people to ask that question.
It's taken this long for them to cast Don. We've had Jennifer Lawrence attached as Rosie for a while. We did have Ryan Reynolds tentatively as Don, but this seems as firm as we've ever been with Henry Cavill. And we're talking about the guy at Superman, The Witcher, and Enola Holmes.
And the younger generation think he's drop dead gorgeous if you don't know him.
Yeah. I didn't really know him, so I had to watch some stuff, and so I've known him for a while. So we had to watch a few things, and
He's pretty cute.
might have let it slip to our daughter, and she said, "Oh God, my partner, he's got a man crush on him." So anyway, our generation doesn't understand that, but. Suffice to say that it's really encouraging news for the movie, and particularly encouraging news that they're thinking about Don first rather than Rosie first. Henry apparently read the book, loved it, and decided he'd like to do this. Well, I've said 2 things really that I've hammered the producers about. One is the representation of autism, because we sort of acknowledged by the third book that Don is autistic, and that is done honestly, respectfully, because frankly, that's the reason that, well, it's not that the books have been popular, they've been very well accepted by the autism community, and I just do not want to lose that. And or cause pain, or cause,
And it was yeah.
people to get it wrong.
But it was inspired by real people that Graham worked with, not someone out of DSM, which is the Psychiatrist Bible. And there's a whole list of things you go ticking off if you want to make up a character. And he never read it. That's not how he came up with Don.
I didn't even know that my friends were autistic. But, as I'm sure many of them were, but without diagnoses back in the day, they just were geeks, people who worked in information technology or engineering or whatever it might be. And the second thing is I'd love them. Supposedly everybody's looking for content at the moment. I just love them to make all three, because my favourite book in the series is the third one, is The Rosie Result. And I would really encourage people to, even if you skip the Rosie Effect, which I think, I'd like to think they don't, but if you go from the Rosie Project, you want to read another one, but you're only so on it, read The Rosie Result, because we have a good look at some sort of autism issues, I hope still with a sense of humour and a bit more broadly than most books do.
Final question for you. Where are you going to walk next?
Well, actually, the Central Rim Walk in southern Queensland, if we're allowed into Queensland in October, which is apparently a really tough walk, but it's only 4 days. And they feed you and give you wine, etc. However, as in a long walk, which is totally different from that sort of walk, we're hoping to do, we had it booked in, we rebooked it, and now they just gave us some money back, the 88 Buddhist temples around the island of Shikoku, which is about 1,000 kilometres. So a gentleman here started it last April, got a week in and had to come back.
Oh, no.
So he might find himself there when we're doing it too.
I thought you were going to say the next place you're going to walk is to the fridge, because I think that's what we're going to be doing this next few days. Thank you so much for a wonderful conversation, Graham and Anne. Big round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you.
Oh, pleasure. We're, of course, very lucky to have Cook and Young booksellers in Geelong tonight selling copies of Two Step Forward, and as well as Sarah's book, Virozone. So if you'd like to purchase a copy and have it signed by the authors before you leave tonight, please head over that way. I'm Joel Carnegie. Thanks so much for everyone coming out this evening. It's great to see you all on this auspicious occasion before we head back into reading and watching whatever we're going to watch online. And on behalf of the Geelong Regional Libraries, we hope to see you again soon. Thank you.